Welcome to Cayman Turtle Center.
A day of fun and adventure awaits at Cayman Turtle Center Island Wildlife Encounter. Swim and snorkel alongside sea turtles and other marine life. Meet tropical birds in the aviary, ride our turtle twister water slide, or simply relax by the lagoon. Plan your adventure today.
Visit us online at www.turtle.ky. Okay, everyone, welcome to the Green Scene. My name is Shona, and I'm an Education Programs Officer at Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center. With me this morning is Geddes Hislop, the Curator of Terrestrial Exhibits and Education Programs at Cayman Turtle Center, and Dr. Gretchen Goodbody Gringley from CCMI. We're excited to bring you another episode of the Green Scene today, and we hope that you'll tune in every single Saturday at 11 a.m. here on Bobo 89.1 FM. As we talk all about conservation, wildlife, and more. In each episode, we'll be exploring topics relating to conservation here in the Cayman Islands, including protecting our natural environment and preserving our culture and heritage, as well as talking all about sea turtles and other native species. This past Thursday, June 8th, was World Oceans Day. So on today's show, we'll be talking all about ocean conservation. Later on in the show, we'll be joined by a special guest, Dr. Gretchen Goodbody Gringley from Central Caribbean Marine Institute. So first of all, I'm going to start off with Geddes and ask if you could give a brief overview of the importance of ocean conservation.
Oh, thanks, Shauna. Ocean conservation. The ocean is our life, basically, especially living on a small island. There are lots of benefits of having the ocean, our marine ecosystems healthy, because there's cultural, there's economic, there are environmental benefits to it. The oceans are basically regulate our temperatures, our weather around us. Lots of people make a living off the ocean, and just having the ocean there is just a beautiful, calming thing. I mean, people pay thousands of dollars every year to come down here to enjoy what we have, and we have some of the best diving in the world. In the Cayman Islands. So yeah, ocean conservation should mean something particularly to all of us. I know a lot of people tend to be busy here just driving past the ocean. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the last time some of them have actually stepped in it, but the fact that it's there, and we need to take care of it. So ocean conservation is something that's very close and very near and dear to a lot of people. And the old Caymanians, especially because in my line of work doing education, we interview a lot of old seamen, and they have a very intimate relationship with the sea, as do all seamen, and they understand the importance of the ocean. Because, for example, I was talking to an old turtler, and one of the things they said is that at all times, if they can help it, when they were hunting sea turtles way back in the 1920s and so on, they try to avoid taking turtles below a certain size, and they try to avoid taking females. And that's before the word conservation was even a thing back then, because they understood that these animals are important to them, but they're also important to the health of the oceans. So yeah, ocean conservation is a big deal. And World Oceans Day is just a way to highlight that. But it's kind of like Christmas. It should be every day, actually.
Yeah, I mean, the downside to being surrounded in the ocean, especially on such a small island, is we sort of forget just how beautiful having all that lovely ocean water around us is. And we also tend to forget just how important the ocean is to the Cayman Islands. I mean, the waves are on our coat of arms, and so is the turtle. So yeah, the ocean is very integral to the Cayman Islands as a whole. So what is the center doing to help protect the ocean habitat out there?
Well, at Cayman Turtle Center, as most people know, our main goal is in the long-term goal is to replenish the green sea turtle population around the Cayman Islands, because that was depleted way back in the 1700s, I believe, by the European explorers. But by doing this, what we're actually doing is ocean conservation. There are many different approaches to ocean conservation. I'm sure when Dr. Gretchen shows up, she will give us a lot more insight on that. But one of the ways I see it is that releasing sea turtles back into the ocean, especially around the Cayman Islands, it also speaks to those three different levels. Environmentally, they're large marine herbivores, so they're really important for maintaining, controlling algae on the reefs, maybe even sargassum.
Yeah.
Because way back then, according to historical records, when Columbus's ships first spotted these islands, they estimate that there were maybe around 2 million sea turtles in the Cayman waters. I bet you they didn't have much sargassum then. So these animals maintain the integrity of the ocean. They're keystone species because they keep the health of these seagrass meadows, and that benefits other animals like conch, lobster, and so on that breed in these kind of environments. So by doing that, they help us to maintain a livelihood, because fishermen, divers, they love to see healthy reefs with lots of fish and healthy coral and so on. And I don't see too many people going down there scrubbing the algae off. So we need sea turtles, at least green sea turtles for that aspect. So center releasing turtles into the wild is following what I think is, well, even before it became a thing again, in Europe and North America, there's this thing called rewilding. With the impact of climate change, they realize that certain keystone species that are either depleted or become extinct, or the numbers are really low. The impact of these species actually help to mitigate the effects of climate change, like beavers in Scotland. They realize when they put beavers there and the beavers create wetland habitats, downstream the water table stabilizes because of those dams they create. Same thing here, because the oceans are warming and we're getting more algae and more plants growing. If you can release more sea turtles, potentially they can help balance that. And not just that, jellyfish. Sea turtles love jellyfish.
It's like candy.
And warming trends favors jellyfish, and we don't like jellyfish. So it's another way, because we don't want to have to end up like Australia, having to put up jellyfish nets and those kind of things. When you can get the wildlife to do their job. So one of the ways the center is doing it's ocean conservation, because, like I said, we're taking care of one of the caretakers of the ocean. Large marine animals have a much bigger impact.
Yeah.
Because just think of it, one whale can eat a lot, also poop a lot, and drop a lot of nutrients in the ocean, as opposed to a school of a whole bunch of fish. You need a whole lot of these fish to do what one whale can do. Same thing, there are grazers on the reef, but one sea turtle can probably graze a lot more than a whole school of doctorfish, for example.
And sorry if I can just interrupt you for a second, but you've mentioned that green sea turtles are keystone species. For someone who's listening who might not know what a keystone species is, can you just explain that phrase?
Okay, well, probably the easiest, the explanation I like the best is they're a species that has a profound impact on its environment. So, I'll use beavers for example, because most people know beavers. You get a woodland and a stream, you add a beaver, you get a wetland because of one animal. That's an extreme case. Elephants, you get an elephant and you get a forest. Eventually the elephants push down trees and everything, they create a little savanna. Bison in North America, they wallow in mud and they create watering holes for other animals. And again, green sea turtles, they graze the seagrass beds, they keep them healthy, just like you mow your lawn when your lawn gets too overgrown, and they keep that healthy, so it benefits other species, because there's no other species that's grazing those beds like something like the green turtles. Yeah, so that's what a keystone species is, basically.
So green sea turtles play a really important role in the marine environment, but they are in quite a bit of danger. They're considered endangered. So what threats are out there for sea turtles, but also other marine animals? Oh gosh,
well, there's a whole lot. And one of the prominent ones besides climate change is plastics in our oceans, and the plastics are going up the food chains. They found plastics in animals at the bottom of the Mariana Trench and in the Antarctic, or the Southern Ocean, as it's now called. So some of the most remote places on Earth, plastics are showing up. And for green turtles, especially the grazers, there's a lot of plastic debris down there in the seagrass beds and maybe even on the reefs, I don't know, but but they're picking up plastics, and that affects them because it affects their digestive system and their intestinal tracts. And I'm sure people have seen probably memes or pictures of marine animals that are wrapped in plastics or caught in fishing lines, ingesting. There's a famous one or well-known one of an albatross, I think it is, that died, and as the body decayed, they saw the body cavity was full of plastic. So plastics or I should say, especially single-use plastics are a real issue out there, and that's one of the major. I think would be one of the major things for sea turtles.
I mean, plastics have been found in all 7 species of sea turtle, also at all life stages from hatching straight up to fully mature adults. So I definitely say marine pollution is a huge factor for them.
Yeah.
But Cayman Turtle Center has been conserving the green sea turtle for over 55 years now. So what are some key success stories and ongoing conservation efforts that have been undertaken by the center?
Well, right now we're celebrating our 55th, I believe it is, anniversary. Since the company started. It started as a private enterprise and was taken over by the Cayman Islands government in the 80s. And it's evolved a lot since then because it originally was an actual sea turtle farm, but now there's a lot more to it than that. But since then, we've released over 36,000 sea turtles at the last count. We've proven that these guys are coming back, and through research, which I won't details. There's a lot of details behind it, but a major study that concluded in 2018 showed that 90% of the breeding population of green sea turtles in Grand Cayman, and about 76% of those in the sister islands, can be traced back to our release program. So yeah, that's a big success because you're working with an animal that's long-lived and takes a long time to get to sexual maturity. And once you put them out in the ocean, the size of an Oreo cookie is really hard to figure out if they're actually coming back or not. So that was a big boost to our morale.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of plugging away and hoping for the best. It's like planting seeds and hoping they'll grow. And they're growing. So that was a big success. We've also been recognized around the world as for turtle research, for what they call ex-situ research, which means not in the environment. And the work that we've been done has been recognized by IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature. We got a couple emails from them saying thank you. and working with institutes in the US, in the UK, and Australia even.
In Spain.
The world comes to Cayman when it comes to sea turtle research, especially when it comes to their physiology and biology, which helps to guide field conservation work and management. Because if you understand the animals and how they breed and when they're mature, how to sex them in the field, things like that, they come to us because we have the resources that they can use to test those things. So it's quite a success being recognized like that. Hopefully, more and more people realize what the gem that we have here in the Cayman Islands with the Turtle Center.
Hopefully. So the center is directly working with the conservation of green sea turtle, but also ocean conservation as a whole. But for the everyday listener, what are some key conservation tips that you can share with them that they can take with them every single day to make life a little bit easier for the oceans?
Oh yeah, well, we promote all the time. We get a lot of at the center. We try to add education to it. The official name of the Turtle Center, it's going to take a while for people locally to change from Turtle Farm to Turtle Center. But as of 2018, the official name of the company is the Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center. They deliberately put those two words in the title, conservation and education, because they're both very important part of what we are striving towards, working towards. So the education side of it is, and the conservation side of it, they all go together. And one of the things that we promote are schools, for example, school groups that come in here. Not just school groups, but everybody comes in there that we talk to. We encourage them to try and pick up 3 pieces of plastic a day. And what that does is just make people aware I don't think we can actually get rid of plastics that way, but we can try to reduce the impact. And sometimes it may feel overwhelming for some people, thinking, oh, I have to go out there and do a whole beach cleanup and everything. That would be great, but if you're walking past a plastic bag floating across the road, just grab it. Do your 3 pieces of plastic today. It's not intimidating, but what it does, it builds that sense of awareness and maybe just develop that habit. And maybe one day you'll do 5. Maybe you might forget the next day, and you try to make it up next day and do 6.
Yeah.
Things like that. And any little plastic is important, because microplastics is also an issue, as you mentioned. As the plastics break down, it doesn't matter what size, they all get in there. So another thing we also do is we support beach cleanup programs. We're pushing a lot of corporate education, because while we're working on the school kids and they're doing their thing and they're getting the message, while we're waiting for them to grow up, we want to work on the decision makers that are there now. So we're doing a lot of corporate education, going to the companies and doing presentations to them, and we're getting great feedback in terms of volunteers and even sponsoring turtle releases in some cases. So yeah, those are the main things that we're doing, or successes that we have.
I know some people might look at picking up 3 pieces of plastic or trash a day and think it's not having a massive impact, but over 80% of marine pollution comes from land. So even though you don't think picking up that 1 plastic bag will make a difference, I guarantee you it does.
Yeah, and Cayman isn't that big, so at some point something is going to end up in the ocean.
Exactly.
Sadly.
So I'm afraid, guys, we have to take a break, but when we come back, we'll be joined with Dr. Gretchen from the Central Caribbean Marine Institute. So stay tuned and we'll be right back.
Welcome to Cayman Turtle Center.
A day of fun and adventure awaits at Cayman Turtle Center Island Wildlife Encounter. Swim and snorkel alongside sea turtles and other marine life. Meet tropical birds in the aviary, ride our turtle twister water slide, or simply relax by the lagoon. Plan your adventure today.
Visit us online at www.turtle.ky.
Did you know that turtles play an important role in ocean ecosystems? Turtles maintain healthy seagrass beds and coral reefs, providing key habitat for other marine life and helping to balance marine food webs and nutrient cycling. Learn more about our turtle friends at the Cayman Turtle Center.
Hello, my name is Coco. I'm a Cayman parrot at the Cayman Turtle Center. I was rescued and love my home here. Did you know our human friends at the center breed and raise Cayman parrots, the national bird of the Cayman Islands, then release them to live in the wild? Come visit me and my bird friends at Cayman Turtle Center.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Green Scene on Bobo 89.1 FM. Right now, I'm currently joined with Dr. Gretchen Goodbody Gringley from the Central Caribbean Marine Institute. Dr. Gretchen is CCMI's Director of Research and has been with CCMI since January 2020. Prior to that, she was an assistant scientist at the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences, where she's led the Reef Ecology and Evolution Laboratory. She completed her Bachelor of Science at the University of Georgia and her PhD at Harvard University. She then held a postdoctoral positions at Mote Marine Laboratory and the University of Bologna in Italy. Her research focuses on population structure, reproductive ecology, and genetic connectivity of a variety of organisms which inhabit tropical coral reef ecosystems, ranging from inshore shallow water reefs down to the mesophotic zone, with the goal of understanding how ecosystems function in order to maintain biodiversity. So welcome on the show today, Dr. Gretchen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely no problem. So could you talk us through a few of the research projects that CCMI is currently doing for ocean conservation?
Sure, I'd love to. So CCMI's main goal is to be a leading research institute which contributes to overall education and conservation of the marine environment. So the majority of the research projects that we do have ultimately a conservation deliverable at the end point. So everything that we're trying to do in terms of research is under this larger umbrella of either education or conservation or both. So some of the key projects that we're working on right now are things like coral restoration, which you may have heard of. We actually initiated a coral nursery in 2012 on Little Cayman, and we've been maintaining that nursery ever since. And in addition to just maintaining those corals, we then use them to replant the reef. So we're focused on a coral species that is critically endangered. It's the staghorn coral, or Acropora cervicornis. And in the 1970s, 1980s, it was probably the predominant coral species across the Caribbean. So all of this, back reef zone or hard pan area would have had loads of Acropora corals all over it. Mm-hmm. But in the early 80s, it was hit with the disease that killed, roughly 90% of these corals. And because of that, the coral species was listed as endangered, and really region-wide, scientists and conservationists have come together to try to restore this population. So that's the reason that we have the coral nursery, and why we're taking corals, we grow corals in the nursery, and then we take those individuals and we plant them back out onto the reef in an attempt to regrow what used to be.
Mm-hmm. So I know some people might not know a lot about corals, and especially the importance of corals. I know a few people that seem to think that corals are rocks, but we know that corals are living organisms.
Yeah.
So can you just tell me a little bit about the importance of corals in the marine ecosystem?
Oh, yeah. Corals are ecosystem engineers. So they're actually the building blocks of the entire ecosystem. They are an animal, so they're a little tiny animal. And in fact, when they start out their life, they're about 1 millimeter long and swimming around in the ocean. They happen to land on the reef and then grow into a single little polyp. And you can almost think of them, they're very closely related to jellyfish. So each individual coral polyp is sort of like an upside down jellyfish that's attached to the seafloor. Mm-hmm. And then it starts to secrete or build its skeleton underneath it. And it grows by creating more and more of these little polyps that are identical to one another. So this large boulder that you see on the reef is made up of thousands of these individual little polyps that are identical. They're like twins or quadruplets, or I don't even know how you would say that for thousands, right? So they're all exactly identical, and they make this large boulder. And these units then are really what are responsible for creating habitat, for creating places for things to live, shelter for creatures, and they're also, what provides that structure to protect our island from storms and waves and that sort of thing.
Yeah, they are really important to the environment, and the conservation of them is really important. So just like with us at Cayman Turtle Center, turtles aren't only here in Grand Cayman, they're around the world. So we do collaborate with a lot of other organizations in the Caribbean and worldwide. So what collaborations has CCMI done across the world with different organizations?
CCMI is actually celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, and in those 25 years, thank you. In those 25 years, we've built a lot of collaborations. I think initially we were really focused on collaborations in Florida because it's so close, the systems are very similar, and also the restoration work was really spearheaded in Florida. So we've learned a lot of lessons from them. Since then, our programs have grown dramatically. So at present, we have collaborations in the UK, in Israel, in the U.S., throughout the East Coast, as well as Hawaii. And then we're also collaborating with individuals in Panama as well at the Smithsonian. So really we have these worldwide connections now where visiting researchers are coming to CCMI to do their science or to assist us with ours, and vice versa. So we have a really strong exchange program with ideas and knowledge.
That's incredible. And conservation and working with other organizations is not just important, it's also really important to work with the local community on conservation programs as well, because they're the ones living in that environment and interacting with that environment daily. Mm-hmm. So what would you say is the significance of citizen science and community involvement with marine research here?
Oh, I think that citizen science is so strong in Cayman. You have all of these really great groups like the Mangrove Rangers, for example, and Plastic Free Cayman, that are all really working toward this same goal of conserving and protecting the marine environment. And we try to work very strongly with each one of these groups. We've definitely had Plastic Free Cayman come over and do a stay at CCMI. We assist them with beach cleanups and vice versa. And so I think working with all of these local conservation groups makes the effort overall more effective. So coming together and working together is really key. And I think also one of the things that Getty has pointed out was this education component. And so one of our main goals at CCMI is educating the youth of Cayman and bringing students over to CCMI, some of them having their first ever experience or exposure to marine life under the water, putting a mask on and seeing those creatures for the first time. It can be a really life-changing experience. And we're really trying to build those ocean stewards or those environmental advocates so that as they grow into the adults that are making decisions in Cayman, that they're making decisions that are conscious of the environment and conservation. And I think that's one of the biggest ways that we as CCMI, as well as the Turtle Center, are making an impact.
I definitely agree. I mean, one of my takeaways is people care about what they understand, and they can only understand what they're taught about. And so doing the work and educating the public on the conservation needs of the environment is really important, especially here. Because I don't know if anyone's been outside recently, but it is very hot. I would say abnormally hot for this time of year, even though it is usually hot in summertime. And climate change has become a huge factor, not only here, but around the world. So what are some of the noticeable climate change indicators that CCMI might have recorded over the past few years?
So CCMI has been doing long-term monitoring of the coral reefs in Little Cayman since our inception. So we now have almost 25 years of long-term monitoring data. And one of the really interesting things that we see is that there are these times when the reef starts to decline and then can recover, but then declines again. And those tend to coincide with extremely hot summers. And I think probably most of the listeners to this show understand that the reef responds very dramatically when the ocean gets too hot. And we see that in that it becomes white or bleached. And that's because corals are an animal, as I described before, but they also have this association with an algae that lives inside of its tissue. And it's reliant on that algae for almost 99% of the energy that is required for it to survive. But that little tiny algae is very sensitive to temperature. So even an increase of 1 degree can cause that algae to sort of freak out metabolically, and it starts producing toxic levels of what we call reactive oxygen. And then the coral gets mad and says, okay, I don't like you anymore, that you're making my environment inhospitable. So it kicks out that algae. And now the coral starves because it can't get enough energy. So, it's not necessarily in its best interest to kick out that algae, but it's also not working for it to keep it. And so, this bleaching of the coral reef is really probably the most prominent effect that we see of climate change. And what's really profound and somewhat worrying is that we're starting to see bleaching events happening now on an almost annual basis. And so, how are we going to manage conserving our coral reefs if we can't tackle this major problem, which is the continued warming of our oceans?
Yeah, so, the warming oceans and also the disease within corals is not just something here in the Cayman Islands. It's a worldwide epidemic affecting coral reefs across the globe. So how would you say Cayman reef systems are looking in terms of health compared to other reefs around the world?
Yeah. Well, Little Cayman in particular is probably one of the healthiest reefs I have ever dived on in the Caribbean. So our monitoring data shows that the percent cover of coral on the seafloor in Little Cayman is 22%. And to put that in perspective, region-wide in the Caribbean, it's less than 5%.
That's incredible.
So comparatively, Little Cayman is doing really well. Grand Cayman, unfortunately, is a slightly different story. And a lot of that has to do with the prevalence of the stony coral tissue loss disease that arrived in 2020. I think before that, Grand Cayman was also considered a very healthy reef for the Caribbean. But unfortunately, that disease has taken a pretty nasty toll on the corals. So I think, mitigating disease, understanding what is causing diseases and how we could potentially prevent that from happening, especially in Little Cayman. We're working quite closely with the DOE to make sure that if we do see signs of stony coral tissue loss disease, that we approach it as effectively as possible and as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem a bit like doom and gloom of all these upsetting things happen in the ocean. But the great thing about ocean and nature is if given the time and giving the support to recover, they do rebound drastically. I know during COVID, it was horrible for us as humans, but the environment really did make a comeback in that period of time. Wild sea turtle nesting increased. Our turtle nesting at the center increased as well. So what changes would you say CCMI saw to the marine environment during the COVID period here?
Well, COVID actually provided this really unique opportunity to study the oceans. As everyone who rode out the pandemic in Cayman knows, there was very little activity happening, and there wasn't really any boating or diving going on. I actually reside here on Grand Cayman, and so it gave me the opportunity to look at the fish populations and how they were responding to this really long period of limited activity. So we went out and surveyed 4 sites along the west side of Grand Cayman, really close to the port. So some of them are our really popular dive sites, and some, we were climbing off the iron shore to make sure we were getting into a spot that would normally have a heavy boat traffic. And the results of that study were remarkable. We found a significant increase immediately post-COVID in fish density and biomass. I mean, the fish just came right back. The population exploded and continued to increase for the entirety of our lockdown period. So really, for the next year and a half, we saw the density of fish continue to increase, and really probably the most profound group were the juvenile parrotfish. So we saw so many more juvenile parrotfish on every single survey. The number of juveniles was increasing and increasing and increasing. And so, that was really an indication that the fish were healthy, they were reproducing, they were recruiting to the reefs right there in Georgetown Harbor. And we stopped that project shortly after cruise ships returned, just because getting to some of those sites was not really feasible anymore. But we did see an initial beginning signs of a decline right after the cruise ships returned. So I think it's important to keep in mind that, even just boating, having boats on the surface can affect the fish populations. And so our impact can be quite large, and we not even thinking that we're doing anything disruptive. So just being conscious of the way we interact with the ocean and the environment. Now diving tourism is back full-fledged. So making sure we communicate with those tourists not to touch the wildlife, not to touch the corals. That sort of thing is really important because even though it might seem small, that the cumulative effect of that exposure can be great.
And I know that noise is really important in the marine environment. The ocean itself, without any man-made interaction, is really noisy. And if anyone here is a snorkeler or diver that's listening, if you've been under the water, you've heard a boat go past, and that boat can be quite a distance away from you. So it's not surprising that with reduced noise, the fish and all the other animals were thriving.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what's funny is that some of my team, we dive on rebreathers as well, which don't produce bubbles. And the difference when we do fish counts on our rebreather is completely different than when we do a fish count when we are on open circuit and have the bubbles, just because of the sound of the bubbles.
Yeah. So the ocean's incredible. I'm afraid, guys, we do have to take another break, but when we come back, we will be talking a lot more about ocean conservation. So please stay tuned on Bobo 89.1 FM, and we'll be right back with you. Thanks.
Welcome to Cayman Turtle Center.
A day of fun and adventure awaits at Cayman Turtle Center Island Wildlife Encounter. Swim and snorkel alongside sea turtles and other marine life. Meet tropical birds in the aviary, ride our turtle twister water slide, or simply relax by the lagoon. Plan your adventure today.
Visit us online at www.turtle.ky.
Did you know that turtles play an important role in ocean ecosystems? Turtles maintain healthy seagrass beds and coral reefs, providing key habitat for other marine life and helping to balance marine food webs and nutrient cycling. Learn more about our turtle friends at the Cayman Turtle Center.
Hello, My name is Coco. I'm a Cayman parrot at the Cayman Turtle Center. I was rescued and love my home here. Did you know our human friends at the center breed and raise Cayman parrots, the national bird of the Cayman Islands, then release them to live in the wild? Come visit me and my bird friends at Cayman Turtle Center.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Green Scene on 89.1 FM. Right now, we're going to talk about the importance of ocean conservation, not only here in the Cayman Islands, but globally, essentially. And the marine environment is such a massive habitat that's home to many different species. So what are some of the conservation programs going on for the marine animals right now here in the Cayman Islands? But if you have any advice for ones worldwide as well, I'm going to start off with Dr. Gretchen. I know, a big topic, I'm sorry.
That's a huge topic. Well, globally, the oceans have gained a lot of interest in the last decade or so. And I think that's particularly when you think about global warming and bleaching events that have now happened across all tropical reef systems. And that's really caught the attention of world leaders, especially, for example, the IUCN, the United Nations, and there are a myriad of new laws and bills being passed that are taking into consideration how our actions are impacting corals. So I think even though it's taken a long time for our voices to be heard and for us to be, standing on the pedestal shouting about what's going on, it's now starting to make its way into government agenda. And I think that's really important that we're being listened to and the science is starting to be heard. So I think that's really one of the main things that it's going to take is a global recognition and coming together of world leaders to start to tackle climate change.
Yeah, and I think not only is that due to, a lot of it does have to do with education of ocean conservation, but a lot of it as well is we're starting to feel the negative effects of the ocean being in trouble and the marine environment basically asking for help. So I know climate regulation is really important and the ocean is sort of feeling the effects of climate change, but the oceans themselves are really important for helping regulate climate, right?
Yeah. So the ocean itself regulates climate in many ways. And one of the ways is just in how it circulates. So it's drawing down heat from certain regions and transporting it to the deep ocean, which cools it and then moves it. So the way that the ocean circulates actually drives weather patterns across the globe. And, that's what causes monsoon seasons or, the mini ice age in England was caused by a shift in ocean currents. So how the ocean moves is really important, but also what is living in the ocean is really important. So all the tiny things that we can't see that are living in the water are very important to regulation of climate, like the phytoplankton. It's microscopic little algae. You can't really see it, but it's producing a lot of oxygen and drawing down huge amounts of carbon dioxide. So in terms of regulating climate change, the ocean is a key player in that.
And aquatic plants help a lot with climate regulation as well. So Geddes, I know you know a little bit about the mangroves and how they help protect us from climate issues. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, because when we think about ocean, we need to think of it from shore to shore, basically, especially on islands. And yeah, mangroves are an important part of that because mangroves out of all the, I don't know if you can, semi-aquatic plants, maybe. Yeah, they sequester more carbon than any other habitat. And there's such an important part, especially for tropical coastal regions. It's such an important part of the ecosystem, with protecting the coastlines, providing nurseries, filtering water, especially in the Cayman Islands with our beautiful clear blue water. Filtering all that runoff that goes into there that keeps the water nice and clear. So mangroves are a really important part of the ocean as well. So I like to think of, at least the way I was taught, is that you have to take the habitat as a whole.
Yeah.
You can't just think the reef by itself or the open ocean by itself or the sound by itself, because it's all connected. It's kind of like highways. Things move backward and forward, like Dr. Gretchen said. Currents and things flow from one to the next. Animals move from one to the next, and so we can't just isolate one part of it. And it's going to take a while. I think it's going to take a while for people to change that kind of thinking, because sometimes they think, I clean up the beach, and the mangroves are full of stuff, but the beach is clean.
Yeah.
And they're all interconnected. You think of seagrasses as well, are also a major region that can sequester carbon because they're absorbing carbon dioxide and putting that into the sediment. So by conserving sea turtles that are preserving the health of your seagrass meadow, you're also tangentially affecting or promoting carbon sequestration and climate mitigation.
Yeah.
So, all these things are interlinked with one another. And the mangroves, for example, are, key nursery habitat for a lot of species, including grouper. So by protecting mangroves, you're helping food security as well as climate mitigation. So, all of these things are intertwined, and you can't, take one piece out of that puzzle.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when you think about it from a cultural aspect, way back, I can use Cayman as an example. I know a lot of the fishermen know intuitively that the mangroves are important habitats for the fish. So there are certain species that they will and will not take. They will not damage mangroves. So on. But now, nobody seems to care. It's just sad. Dredging seagrass beds. Like I said, people would see that it's just seagrass, just yucky stuff. But sequestering carbon, even stabilizing the seafloor, things like that, so you don't end up with sand all over your roads.
Hurricanes.
Or loss of your beach.
Yeah.
Loss of your beach. Yeah. 'Cause now they're starting to find out the hard way. So.
And it's, not just carbon, but the ocean also aids a lot in producing oxygen as well. So one of the very things keeping us and many other animals alive. So if anyone could just tell me a little bit about the oxygen production that goes on in the marine habitat.
Okay. Well, I can tell you one aspect. From one aspect, when we do our shark talks at the Turtle Center, one of the things that we point out to people, we talk about sharks as being one of the key creatures that maintain the health of the oceans, and explain all that to them. And one of the ways that we promote it to people is that by keeping the oceans healthy, we get to breathe. And in the predator reef exhibit that we have, the rocks are covered with algae inside there. And in the middle of the day, when the sun is at its peak, you can actually see that algae producing oxygen. It starts to look like a fish tank because they're producing bubbles on their own. And we point that out to people, and you can see the lights go on and say, oh, wait a minute. If it's that happens in that one little tank, imagine what's going on in the whole ocean. Yeah, I think every time, the strategy we use is we try to relate it back to people. Things that they can relate to. While I'm driving in my air-conditioned car, how does the ocean affect me? Well, yeah, I have air to move because of the ocean.
Yeah, and I think, protecting those habitats, those aquatic plants, we talked about the mangroves, the seagrasses, the algae, I think there's sort of a push and pull with algae because algae compete with coral. So, you don't want too much algae on your reef, but you do need a little bit of algae, but also the phytoplankton in the water column. And probably even that sargassum that we don't like so much is actually, there are some benefits to that. And one of those would be oxygen production.
And also for baby sea turtles. Sargassum is very important to baby sea turtles.
And little crabs. So there's some endemic species, like little sargassum fish that only live in sargassum. It's really its own little habitat. And it's big habitat.
A very big habitat, yeah. And it's not just helping the animals out there in the ocean through that and through providing air that we breathe, but it also affects our pockets as well. The marine environment holds huge economic value, not only to the Cayman Islands, but countries across the world as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we know already, fishing, just for one.
Yeah.
Diving, another one, and all the trickle-down effects that come from those. Yeah, especially here where there's such an intimate connection to the sea, and you can reach across. You can find examples of that throughout the Caribbean and other places around the world. When it comes to major fishing stocks, depleting. Some species are being depleted just by that wanton just overfishing, but they're finding that if I remember right, in Norway, somewhere up in Nordic countries, they did an experiment where they actually allowed reduced catch so that the ocean predators could have their fill, and they found out that the fishing stocks actually rebounded because of the predators. Predators are being there. Most people accuse things like seals and dolphins and even pelicans. Well, here in Cayman, I remember, of competing with people for catching fish. They realize the importance of the predators have, the importance effect that predators have on the health of these fish stocks. Just by allowing them to have their share, they maintain healthy fish stocks. That's putting it simply, but that's basically what it turned out to.
Yeah, and I think fishing is just one aspect of the economic benefits we get from the ocean. And I think it's definitely the low-hanging fruit. It's so easy, tangible for us to understand. Yes, we see fish, we take fish. If we take too many fish, it has an impact. There are all these other things that we are getting, resources that we get from the ocean that are less obvious. I think one of those is the protection from the storms. So, I mean, I wasn't lucky not to have been here during Ivan, but I've heard stories that, the entirety of the island was underwater. And if we didn't have the reef to mitigate the waves that are coming from storms like that, it would have been even worse. So, having the reef, having a healthy ecosystem is so important to just the maintenance of the physical aspect of this island that often goes unnoticed. And then, of course, the tourism economic impact is massive. Many island nations are reliant on tourism for the driving force of their economy, and tourism is going to stop if you don't have something beautiful for them to look at. So preserving the ocean ecosystem will in turn preserve that economic force, or that means of revenue that as a country that you can get from this resource that's just there for free for you to use.
For us.
Yeah.
Just surrounds our islands.
Yeah.
Which we all know how the oceans play a huge role in the culture of the Cayman Islands as a whole. We weren't a place very well known for agriculture, and we're still not because we don't have very good soil here. So where most people do turn to is either importing stuff. We've got a few farmers now, but also back in the olden days, they turned to the ocean because that was one of the best ways they could supply their family with food, make money for themselves.
Yeah, I think one of the lessons that people have learned globally about fishing and the potential to overfish is really focusing on species that are offshore, that, not taking things like parrotfish that are going to be really important to keeping your reef clean for algae and healthy corals. So really, which species you take, how much you take, which sizes you take. You look at the impacts of the grouper regulations, and they've just been completely astonishing what's happened in Little Cayman with the spawning aggregation. So taking those steps to sustainably manage your fishery is really important for the overall persistence of your populations.
Yeah. Like we said earlier, giving the environment and the animals out there the time and the support to recover.
Yeah.
They will. They definitely will. But thank you, everyone. I believe we have to take another break, so we'll see you when we get back.
Hi, you're listening to The Green Scene on Bobo 89.1 FM, brought to you by the Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center. I'm Jennifer Robinson, and I'm the aquarist. We'll be back in a few moments.
Hi, this is Geddes from the Cayman Turtle Conservation Education Center.
Hi, this is Shona from the Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center.
Hey, this is Wendy from the Cayman Turtle Conservation and Education Center. We're inviting you to our new show.
Welcome to Cayman Turtle Center.
A day of fun and adventure awaits at Cayman Turtle Center Island Wildlife Encounter. Swim and snorkel alongside sea turtles and other marine life. Meet tropical birds in the aviary, ride our turtle twister water slide, or simply relax by the lagoon. Plan your adventure today.
Visit us online at www.turtle.ky.
Did you know that turtles play an important role in ocean ecosystems? Turtles maintain healthy seagrass beds and coral reefs, providing key habitat for other marine life and helping to balance marine food webs and nutrient cycling. Learn more about our turtle friends at the Cayman Turtle Center.
Hello, my name is Coco. I'm a Cayman parrot at the Cayman Turtle Center. I was rescued and love my home here. Did you know our human friends at the center breed and raise Cayman parrots, the national bird of the Cayman Islands, then release them to live in the wild? Come visit me and my bird friends at Cayman Turtle Center.
Okay, everyone, welcome to the Green Scene on Bobo 89.1 FM. Right now we're talking about ocean conservation, and right now we're going to jump back into it, and I'm just going to reiterate in case anyone hasn't been here for the whole entire time, but can you tell me just about the importance of ocean conservation here in the Cayman Islands, but also globally, Dr. Gretchen?
Yeah, ocean conservation is so important here locally because, we are one with the ocean here in Cayman. It is our life. It provides our oxygen. It provides the habitat. It provides tourism. It provides fish. It provides protection. Conserving that resource is critical to our society and our way of life. And so, when you project that out globally, there are so many other countries that are similar to Cayman. But even landlocked areas, they're receiving benefits from the ocean as well in terms of climate mitigation, in terms of food sources, all these things. The ocean has an impact across the globe. It's 75% of our globe. So it's actually the majority of our planet, and definitely something that is worth conserving.
Definitely, and still a lot of the ocean yet to be explored as well. Yeah. It's still a massive environment. But Dr. Gretchen, what recommendations do you personally have, or advice do you have for the average person who might not know how to, but want to help be involved in ocean conservation? Yeah,
I know it's cliche to say it, but I think, small efforts build to bigger meaning. So every step that you take, every little action that you do can grow into something more meaningful. So if that's from participating in a beach cleanup, from helping the mangrove rangers with planting some new baby mangroves, to eating a diet that is less reliant on meat and fish, all these things come together to make an impact that we can all do. They're manageable things that we can do.
I think one of the easiest things we can do, especially here, is, like you touched upon, sustainable seafood, which, can you just quickly give a definition for sustainable seafood for anyone listening who might not know? Yeah, so sustainable seafood are types of taking fish that the population is a healthy population. There's enough data available so we know how many of those individuals we can take and still have enough to continue that population so that, next generation can also use that resource rather than going out and taking the entire population for single use. We only take a few. So only using, what we need and making sure that we keep those critical numbers in the population so that they can persist. Exactly. So I try to follow sustainable seafood practices, but for anyone who might not know how to do that themselves, there is something in Cayman called Cayman Sea Sense. If you Google it, it'll pop right up. It's a little pamphlet that gives you sustainable fish options here in the Cayman Islands. But also, if you go to restaurants around here, there's usually a little sign with an oval and a grouper in it that shows you if your option is sustainable seafood. Another thing we like to tell people about at our Shark Talks is Seafood Watch, put on by the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California. And I like that one for our visitors because they break it down as a stoplight system. So fish in green, good to go. Fish in yellow or orange, you might have to do a little bit more research. And fish in red, if you're eating it, it's probably not sustainable. But obviously, if you're going vegan or vegetarian, you're already helping the environment massively in that way. And Geddes, what recommendations do you have for people who might want to get involved in ocean conservation here in the Cayman Islands?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with Dr. Gretchen. Any little step is a good step. So it could be as simple as we promote at the center, you can pick up 3 pieces of plastic a day, or you can volunteer. You can volunteer with one of the organizations, Mangrove Rangers, Plastic Free Cayman, or at the Turtle Center. You can volunteer to help us with our programs of turtle conservation, which by extension is ocean conservation, and definitely educate yourself. Learn some more, because you can make informed decisions. That will make a step. And sometimes it can be even the simplest things, some of the simplest things, like some of the things I tell the kids. Do you always have to keep the water running while you're brushing your teeth? Do you have to leave a light on every time you leave the room? Simple things like that all accumulate to make an effect.
Or even turn your air conditioning temperature up 1 degree. It makes a huge difference, not only for the climate, but for your bill.
Yeah.
Especially
which we're all struggling with this month.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I know some people might be listening, and hopefully some of what we talked about resonated with them, and they just understand how important the ocean and all the other animals out there are for not only the health of the ocean and the environment as a whole, but also to them. So, Dr. Gretchen, what opportunities are there for listeners to get involved and volunteer or support your organization?
At the moment, the majority of our programs are centered around Caymanian youth. So if you or someone you know is interested in learning more about the marine environment and would like to come participate in one of our camps, we have Summer Marine Ecology Camp happening this summer. We also have rolling internships that are for Caymanians only, and it's fully funded internship for you to come stay at CCMI for 3 months a year. And so we're always looking for eager individuals to apply for those internships. And then the other way you can get involved is, of course, to visit our website, donate to CCMI, or help us by attending our annual gala event, which will be November 4th at the Kimpton.
And if someone wanted to get in contact with CCMI, what method would they have to go through?
Yeah, the best way to get in contact with us is to visit our website, which is reefresearch.org.
Perfect. And Geddes, if someone wanted to get involved in conservation at Cayman Turtle Center?
Oh, yes, same thing. You can check us out on our social media or visit the website, www.turtle.ky. Or email us, info@turtle.ky. That's the best way to get in touch with us.
And what are some of the opportunities that Cayman Turtle Center offers?
Oh yeah, well, volunteers. We're always with volunteers. A lot of people come in there to get their work. People in Grand Cayman, students especially, coming to get their work experience. But we welcome volunteers all the time, especially now in the turtle breeding season, because we have releases, we have hatchling watches, we have all kinds of things going on. So yeah, just contact us, and we'd be happy to accommodate you once you have a space available.
Can students get their volunteer hours?
Yes, yes, especially during the summertime, we get a lot of requests for volunteer hours.
Excellent.
Yeah, definitely get a lot of requests for volunteer hours. So thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you so much to Dr. Gretchen from CCMI, but also to Geddes from the Cayman Turtle Center for joining us today for the Green Scene.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hi, this is Geddes Hislop. I'm the curator for terrestrial exhibits and education programs at the Cayman Turtle Conservation Education Center. Check us out on the Green Scene. You can tune in on Saturdays at 11 a.m. Bobo 89.1 FM.